Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Brandon and Ruby. And this, I just want to start it off with anti-fitness wankery, kind of breaking apart bullshit, but teaching you in the process. Because in all of this, there is a reason why we have the beliefs that we do. There's a reason we start out the way that we do. Like everyone is telling you to focus on high protein, but there are so many things they're missing out from that if you only focus on protein, you're not going to get your results. And a complete rant that I'm starting to go down now is everyone is telling you you need to eat more, you need to reverse diet, you need to eat more to boost your metabolism or to build muscle. But there is a whole chunk that they are missing. And in the process of missing that, you're going to end up softer. You're going to end up looking worse, feeling worse. And then you're going to troubleshoot back to a diet because now you're uncomfortable. And that is the biggest issue because everything has become about calories. Everything has become about we're either eating more or we're eating less. And it's missing the fundamental piece of how does this all work together? Number one, in your lifestyle. Number two, how does eating more, like what is eating more allowing you to do? It's allowing you to train harder. And it's that training harder. It's that boosting of performance. It's the ability to not binge, to emotionally eat, to not think about food 24/7, to be able to stick to something, to be able to be more active outside of the gym that's going to boost your metabolism. There are so many aspects that are missed, but it is so easy to believe something. And then when people say Pilates makes you long and lean, well, there's a reason you believe that because people doing Pilates look long and lean, but it's not the Pilates that got them there. And this trainer that works with Brandon, as an example, has a six-pack without even trying. And we can all say, okay, so doing what he does will get me there. But you're not looking at, okay, what are his eating habits? What does he do on a day-to-day basis? You're just pinning it down on that one thing, but it's not that one thing that got him there. You might see him doing crunches one day and be like, oh, that's why he has the six-pack. But no, that's just the habits that he's developed. And many people coming to a coach don't have a history of health and fitness. Sometimes you might, and then you fell out of it. And that is an issue if you then expect yourself to just learn something overnight, to understand something from the get-go and to be able to master all of these habits. And this is where the resistance comes up. It's not that you don't want it bad enough. It's not that you can't stay consistent. It's just that you're expecting so much out of yourself from the get-go and you haven't slowed down, which I love your term when you say we just need to slow down. Let's take a step back. Let's zoom the fuck out and see what is it that we're dealing with. Why do I believe what I believe as well? Like, what do I believe? And if you heard our first podcast on this, I asked Brandon, how do we start out off the gate to get to where we want to be? And he threw it back at me saying, well, it's not about what we're doing to start off. It's about figuring out where we are on the map to begin with. And that's the piece that most people miss out because boot camp style workouts and typical group fitness, that has gotten you a result to start with. And this is where everyone kind of loses the traction because anything works until it doesn't. It's when you then want to step it up to the next level or you're working out or trying to figure out why what you used to do isn't working anymore, why you're stuck, why you're probably going backwards because you're trapped in the cycle of thinking that X equals Y. But X doesn't equal Y. For the Y that you want, it's someone else's Y. And I mean that in letters, not WHY. But let's start off this episode with, I guess, when someone comes in and they want to get specific results with body composition, we're told that we need to lift heavy. And now what's out there is women don't need to lift heavy. But what is missing from this whole piece is that fatigue and muscle failure are two different things because you can be completely fatigued and it's just you making yourself tired, i.e. boot camps, HIIT workouts. Like I could make you just run after your kid and you'd be tired. Did that build muscle? No. I got sore hamstrings and legs the other day from running a little bit more than I actually usually do. Did that build muscle? No, because running doesn't build muscle. And we need to kind of understand heavy, the meaning of heavy, the meaning of what builds muscle, the meaning of what takes us further, and why particular things seem so believable. So let's start off there, because I loved how you said this in chats with me.
Yeah, I like the way Mike Boyle talks about it. He's like, it's really easy to make someone tired, but to make someone better requires a bit more purpose, right? I can make you tired. I've got a rabid dog that can chase you around, and I can make you sore. I've got a baseball bat. Does that mean you got a good workout that was effective? No, no, no. So defining heavy, I think it might be easier to just say, once we've discovered that point A, which is kind of what we talked about last time, okay, let's just take the first step. Let's not leap 10 steps. Let's take the first step. Okay, so you started here. We just got to go here in terms of load, in terms of volume, kind of the minimum effective dose. If 2 Tylenol works, that doesn't mean take the whole bottle. So, yeah, most of my clients, when they start, unless they tell me, hey, I want to be really sore, I start them with 2 sets, like 2 sets of 8 of very easy things, and we progress upward from there. And yeah, we'll call an audible on the fly if something's like, this is kind of stupid easy. Like, all right, let's play a little bit. But the goal isn't to get sore. The goal is to get better. In some of the most productive hypertrophy programs that I've done or had people do, there's almost no soreness by the end of the program. There's systemic fatigue, but there's not much soreness. There might be some soreness in the beginning because novelty does that, and kind of how you alluded to earlier, like everything works until it doesn't. I like the way Dan John says it. He says everything works for about 6 weeks. And when we say works, I think we need to define that a little bit better, because it's really, if you're going from the couch to literally anything else, then literally anything is going to work to reduce body fat, probably build a little bit of muscle, because it doesn't take a whole lot of stimulus to build muscle on somebody who's completely sedentary. Once you're not completely sedentary, we kind of have to be a little bit more specific, right? And so the longer you go, the more specific you'll want to be, right? But the main thing, and this is where we were having a conversation about earlier, is progressive overload. Like, okay, some people don't work hard enough, some people work too hard. How do we adjust for that? Just basic progressive overload. Let's pick a good weight. Like my personal approach that I like to take is like, all right, do 8. I watch the set. If it's really easy, but they're kind of done, like, cool, that's our starting point. Next week, we're going to go up half a pound and do it again. And we're just going to titrate up. We might add a set, we might add a pound. I'm not going to add 20 pounds unless I feel like you've really been sandbagging. But that's kind of the thing, is like, if I start a general program down here where it feels a little bit too easy, that falls in line with the Jim Windler principles, which I'm a fan of his approach. He's an effective coach. Start too light, progress slowly, and set records. So like, all right, we're going to start a little bit too light. I'm not going to let you jump 20 pounds on your bench press next week, but I will let you try to do more reps, and I'll end the set when I think it's about to look less than good. I will not allow your form to degrade. If I did, you've already done 1 or 2 reps too many, right? So the main thing is practice, consistency, and getting just a little bit more each time. That's really kind of all it takes. You'll find over time, when you've been doing it long enough, the picture of what you're doing, 5, 6 years from your starting point is radically different. But I think a lot of people get confused because they look at a lot of people's point Z, point X, and they compare it to their point A. Like, that's not a fair comparison. And even if you're at the same level, it's still not a fair comparison, because you're not the same person. You don't have the same genetics. You haven't been doing the same thing for the last 12 years. When we talk about, my coach who has a 6-pack, like, that was a lifestyle result. That was a result of how he ate, 20, 30 years prior to working with me. Right. So you don't have that background. So yeah, if you did what he did, you'd probably have something at least similar to what he has. But that's the thing, you have to do what he did. And that means the nuance of like, hey, every day, this is how he ate. Here was his activity level. You know, was his training spot on? No, but he was lean. And here's what he did to maintain that leanness. He did that automatically. And that's kind of something that we were talking about earlier is like the idea of hard dieting and hard training. It's like, I want to get you to the point that your habits, which are on autopilot and you don't have to think about, lead you to have the body you want. Because if you got the body and it was really hard, that means you got it temporarily. But if you got the body and it's getting easier and easier to do the things that got you the body and you don't think about them as much, you're thinking about them less and less, that means it really worked. That's my personal, like, this is how I judge a program or a coach is like, if you're getting better and it's getting easier, we're doing our job. And that's kind of how I judge my own coaching. I had a client, he lost, I think it was 60 pounds at this point, and he told me he was getting worried because he said, hey, it's a little bit like too easy. Like this is getting easier. I thought it was supposed to get harder the leaner I get. And I told him, no, not unless we're in a like show prep, like for life, to lose weight, to get you healthy, to get you lean, like it should be getting easier. Otherwise you don't get to keep it, you know?
I think that part there, what you just said there, actually, I want to come back to that part. I hear it a lot of time from my ladies as well. They're like, well, I thought that it had to be hard to be effective. It's like if it's almost too easy. Well, it is really easy, quote unquote, really easy, but that's compared to what you're used to doing because social media has made you believe that it needs to be this grueling process. And that is the thing. And the reason that he has found it easy is for the sheer fact that he developed habits. He made it routine. It's not about the best this or the specific protocol. It's less about that and more about finding systems that work for you. And this is the same with like any business process. Businesses themselves, if you think about it in that way, they work a lot more effectively when they have systems in place. Otherwise, they're going to blow through. They're not going to last. And just because I want to touch back on what you said about the heavy part and where they start out, I feel like this is the biggest misconception with people who kind of argue that you have to lift heavy to build muscle. You don't have to lift heavy to build muscle, but then you just said you start people out. It's like, well, yes, because we need to be able to practice good reps. If you practice ineffective reps or bad reps, that is what becomes ingrained, and you're going to have to unlearn all those patterns. So when
and then you're not even training the muscles that you're targeting.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't have a stable core, you're not going to be training your glutes at all because you haven't learned how to brace. But people keep skipping the fundamental pieces because it's not flashy, it's not tangible. You're not seeing the fast progress because it's almost like in your head, all my goals are going on hold because I have to address this other thing, which isn't actually burning my muscles or feeling productive. And just because it doesn't feel productive doesn't mean it's not effective at getting you to where you want to be. If anything, yeah, okay, you can do things your way, but we're going to have to take steps back to then fix the issues. Otherwise, we're going to keep coming up across bottlenecks all the time. And heavy, yes, people are saying lift heavy. People are saying you just need to lift to fatigue. But what they're missing is that heavy is relative, not only for where you are now, but for the exercise, for the rep range. Because if you're doing 12 to 15 reps, it can feel effective, quote unquote. It can get you to quote unquote fatigue. Because if you're doing like 15, 20 reps, like that in itself is fatiguing. You might not even be getting the right muscles to failure because other things start to slack off. It just feels tiring. So then you stop, or it feels too hard. But if you are doing effective 12 to 15 reps, it's going to be a heavy weight for that rep range. If you're doing bicep curls, you might struggle to get that last rep and fail that last rep with 4 kilos. Well, that's a heavy weight for you.
Yeah.
Heavy is
I think
relative.
Yeah, when people hear heavy, they picture like the Ronnie Coleman idea of like, you know, everybody want to be a bodybuilder and don't nobody want to lift no heavy ass weight. Like, yeah, it's, you know, Heavy just means heavier than what you're accustomed to. I had a client once who thought that progressive overload meant to lift more weight than you can lift or more weight than you've ever lifted. And it's like, no, 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 no. It just means to lift a tiny bit more each week than you currently do.
I will
What
also
you
add,
currently do,
it's not just the tiny bit more each week either. And I feel like this is where a lot of stuff gets misconstrued. People don't understand the reality of progress, where at first, yeah, okay, you might be able to add, you mentioned this before, you will be able to add weight every single week when you start, because there's a lot of strength adaptations. You're getting better at the movement, but there comes a period of time where you're not going to be increasing the weight every single week. You'll be lucky to even increase it, especially for upper body, especially for your delts, every month. But there are other ways to progressive overload. There are other ways to improve. And that is also misconstrued, because progressive overload isn't going in with the intention of lifting heavier. It's going in with the intention of beating your last best. Even if that means keeping the same weight, it would feel easier. Sometimes it might not, because you've been in this for a really long period of time. And if you only gauge your success, how long have we been lifting, Brandon? If we keep basing our success, exactly, if we keep basing our success over whether we added a rep or added weight to some particular movements on our logbook, we would be defeated, because it's not possible all the time once you're in it, which is why we need to understand this stuff. Otherwise, we're going to keep ourselves stuck.
you kind of reach a point where you have to compare this year to last year, on things like a bench press or a squat or the lateral raise, and yeah, you kind of nailed it. Like, progress could be, maybe you did the same weight, same reps, but your execution was a little bit better. You had better tempo control. Maybe it just felt easier. Like that, yeah, that's progress. It's also worth bearing in mind that progress is mostly linear for like the first year or so, give or take. And after that, it's not. It does this. If we're doing our job right, then we're going to see this kind of cyclical effect, this kind of oscillating up, down with an overall trend where, like, if I zoom in and all I see is this, like, oh man, I didn't get much better. If we zoom out, we see those little spikes, like, oh, but the overall trend is up. So, like, that's why, especially as a more, like, even as an intermediate lifter or an advanced lifter, like, you start to compare year to year, and then you start doing things like deloads and full on, like, blocks of training that are several months long, where, like, okay, I'm going to start too light, and over the next 3 months I'm going to progress slow, and I'm going to try to set rep records with the weights that I have along the way. So my personal, like, favorite approach is like, all right, I'll start at 70%, work up to 90-ish, and then start over. And that's about it. And go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's the piece that needs to be emphasized, where it's not every 4 weeks you change your program. And
yeah, no.
Like, this is, I should have addressed this up front, and that's why I'm liking, now we're having more of a conversation style, but that's why I'm liking I'm hating the apps that are coming out that change, because when you're paying for an app, they're going to want to keep you on the app. How is it going to keep you there as a client, as a buyer, customer, person using the app? You're not really a client, because you're just following a program that's on the app. How is it going to keep you engaged in paying that same monthly price to an app if the program never changes? So they need to keep you entertained, but that isn't going to build muscle either. And you mentioned soreness. I wanted to bring that soreness part in as well. You're going to keep getting sore every single time you change your workouts every single month. And if you don't understand, like, if it's not tailored to you and where you're at and your recoverability, then you're not going to progress either. This is where the understanding the phases come in. And this is why when you start a new program, which isn't 4 weeks ago or 8 or 6 weeks, or it really depends. This is where I want you to take this one. It depends, because you still want key lifts that stay on for ages. Like, I have half my moves I've been doing since January. Most of those moves I've been doing since like the year before. And I have not been progressively getting stronger at those exercises. I've been doing what you said, oscillating up and down, because when you start new programs, you don't start on the last weight that you used, because it's going to be in an entirely different context now. It might have a different tempo, a different placing in the program. There's systemic fatigue.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who's done Just thinking about that, like anybody who's done a really good powerlifting program, the first week feels like this is kind of too easy. Are you sure this is going to work? Like, yeah, because we're building momentum, right? What the mistake, man, there's so many things I want to go off on. The 4 week thing. Yeah, you can be intertrained or you can make progress. And something I found is people who are getting bored in the gym are they're looking for intertrainment. They want to be intertrained, but if they're making progress, they don't get bored. If you are getting better, you're not going to get bored. When I get a client who's kind of looking bored, I look at their training log over the last 3 months and I'm like, oh, well, no wonder. We did a bad job pushing you and progressing your weights. Got it. That's why you're bored. Or, okay, we've kind of hit a peak with this specific accessory movement or this specific type of main movement. So let's go ahead and like we've hit a point that we need to go ahead and cycle that out and change it just a little bit. Charles Poliquin would call it variation without change. So like, hey, instead of an incline bench, we're going to do a low incline bench. Pretty straightforward, you know. And even then, like we keep our big lifts in, like our squat is always our squat, but hey, maybe this month we'll do tempo squats, you know. Next month we'll add pauses, and then the next month we're just going to do a linear progression model, and the next month we'll stair step that. So like, all right, we'll start at 70%, work up to 75, 80, start again at 75, and we'll just do this, right? But the same movement is still like we're still doing the same movement. Personally, I like to do a 4 week cycle, 4 to 5 weeks, where the first week is a little bit on the easier side. We do fewer sets, but we're doing the same movement, right? And then the last week is really hard. We're doing a few more sets and I'm pushing you closer to failure. And in that first week, we drop the weight back a little bit, but not all the way back to where we started in week 1. We might start with the weight from week 2 or week 3, right? But now we're back to 2 sets and we're leaving some more reps in the tank. So it still feels pretty good. And yeah, we make really good progress this way, right? So kind of that's the stair step cyclical approach, right? Strength is a skill first.
I was just about to say that. I was just about to say that. This is the thing, like strength is a skill. You don't want to train those lifts to, that's something I completely changed my mind on. You don't want to train, like always max out on those lifts. You don't get the best 1 rep maxes by testing your 1 rep max. I've always had that stance. You don't get better at your 1 rep max or something by always doing your 1 reps.
No.
Strength is a skill, and that's why everything else is the hypertrophy stuff. And if you're giving your best every single session there, you're not going to be improving things every single week because you're giving your best as it is. And that's why that it's understanding. So what
your best may not necessarily be like going to failure. It might be you're giving it your best intention and your best practice, like your best mindful approach to the exercise, your best attention to detail in how you're doing it.
I like that part, the mindful part, because so many of us are disconnected from the movements. We're just lifting from A to B. That this is the other thing. Everyone's telling you to lift heavy, but they're not telling you that you can't just lift from A to B. It's a skill to learn how to intentionally focus on the muscles that are working, because there's the movements that you train, which is the strength, the skill, but then there are muscles that you're working, and that's with the hypertrophy. And we typically, I am yet to have a client come to me without me helping them being able to do back exercises effectively. It's all arms, it's all shoulders, it's shrugging. No one knows how to do a lat pull down properly. No one knows how to do a row properly. No one understands the importance of the shoulder blades that come to this, which is where I was going to intervene, saying it's also knowing your weaknesses, because your strengths cannot improve if there is always that weak link stopping you. And then it could lead to injury, back injury, knee injury, because we keep stepping over the stepping stones that are like low down near the water, because they aren't the fancy ones that we can, why don't we just take this huge one and then this huge one? Well, you're going to have a lot more to fall back down every single time you hit a roadblock, every single time something comes up, every single time you can't be consistent. And then you go back into the gym and your body feels like a train wreck, because once you're over 35, that's what happens. When you're not moving your body, movement is medicine. But I just wanted to quickly emphasize that point that you were saying again, so we can go back to that part. It's when you understand that your connection to the movement makes it a more enjoyable, a more rewarding process, because then you can actually start to feel yourself into your training sessions versus just trying to hit numbers, just trying to move weights. As soon as you start to understand how to move your shoulder blades and actually get the lats to start the movement first, because the lats do not bend your arm. You need to get the shoulder to come down without your arm even bending. And that is one of the hardest things. I find that to be one of the most challenging things for me to get clients to do. They can't just get their scapulas to come down without doing this like weird shrug thing. Like learning this stuff is like, it should be rewarding, because then you get to feel things and it just feels more effective. And yeah.
100%. And that's why like you want to start light, like, yeah, we're going to lift heavier than you're used to, but it's still going to be, again, in the beginning of a program, it's going to be pretty easy, because I want you to learn how to do that instead of that, right? And that takes practice. You have to fall off the bike a few hundred times, a few thousand times before you get really good at riding the bike. But once you get good at riding the bike, you're riding the bike. So my thinking is, like, I want to keep it light enough. I want to start, like, I'm always going to progress the weight, especially for a beginner. But I'm going to start light enough that I can progress the weight. The lighter I start, the more I'm drawing back on the bowstring. What a lot of people do, here's your week 3 weight. They will start here and they will end here, when they need to start here and end here. And you can only end here if you start here. The lower the valley, the higher the peak, and vice versa. Which is why we don't go. I was having a conversation with I have a strongman client in Canada, and he was talking to one of his friends about, like, why you don't do bike sprints between squats. Because when you practice a movement under fatigue, you can think of it like etching your name in wood. When you're under fatigue, you're going to make more mistakes. And that's etching poorly. You missed the line that you were trying to make, but that's kind of ingraining that habit into your nervous system and saying, this is how to do that movement. So every rep you practice that is bad kind of sticks, and it's going to take that much more work to unlearn those bad reps. And if you're always fatigued, you're just never going to get good at that movement, which means you'll never see your potential, right? Start light, be patient, practice. And yeah, like, okay, I'll give a specific example. If I get a client who, I see them, they successfully bench, it's a 45-year-old lady. She successfully benches 75 pounds. I've got someone in mind. She successfully benches 75 pounds. It's not perfect, but it's actually pretty good. I might start her week 1 at 65, and then I'm going to use fractional plates. Let's say she did a set of 8. I'm going to start her at sets of 6, and I'm going to use my little, like, 3/4 pound plates every week to increase the weight. And we're going to just do a few more sets of 6, and we're going to practice with a lot of intention, and I'm going to slow her tempo down. I had a kid come in who I watched him bench, and he got up to 155. And then I told him how I wanted him to bench, and we had to drop it all the way down to, I think it was 85 pounds. And then we still needed to go a little bit lighter after that.
I will give you a story of my squats then, because when I was squatting, I was doing like quarter squats, and I got myself up to 100 kilos. And then finally, a few months later, I finally got to 105. I tried to get 110. Like, I was always oscillating between them. And this was an ongoing process. I could never break that 110 for more than like a couple of reps. And it was killing me. And I was going and going. Like 6 months later, given this was like back in 2016, a year into my lifting, because I was consistent, I was training hard, I was fueling for it because I wanted to gain. And I did gain. I gained like 8 kilos on the scale or some shit, because I started off small. Like, I was fueling for this shit. So I was able to progress my weights. Regardless, I was attached to that freaking number. And this was back in the time when I thought that you put the pussy pads, well, the hip thrust pads, onto the back of the squat. So that's how I started. And then I ditched that, and I had to listen to the coach that I had back then. And he's just like, I want you to just do 100 squats a day with the bar. 100. I want 5 sets of 20 reps every day you walk into the gym. And I want your ass touching your calves. And fuck, like, the first day, from 100 kilos, 105 kilos to just the bar, I couldn't walk. Like my quads
Yeah,
were fucked. I was
that's a
like,
lot.
what? Like how? Like I dropped from 100 to 20, and that's what I see with people as well. Like if you stay so married to the number, you're not going to re-ingrain a proper pattern. But I just remember that so like vividly because I was bamboozled by how sore my legs were with such a quote unquote light weight. See, there's a perfect example. 20 kilos was freaking heavy for me for that rep range, for that range of motion. Because you can even just do shoulder presses. I think they teach this in NASM or some stupid shit. You stop your shoulder presses where your arms are parallel, which is absolutely dumb.
I always
Because
thought that was strange. Yeah.
I don't understand it. Like I see it everywhere. And then when I finally ask someone, why do you believe that? Oh, it's what NASM teaches you. I'm like, why? Oh, because
Yeah.
it's not
This.
shoulders. Well, if you do shoulder presses wrong, of course it's not good for the shoulders.
Yeah. There's like, and it's, I don't know how much of it is accurate. Like, in theory, like you can get some kind of impingement in here, but the reality is, again, I say that in theory. Some people do get that.
Because they're doing this,
So
they're not doing
yeah,
this.
what I do for those people is I just have them rotate. That's where the Arnold press came from. Is it was like, hey, this doesn't hurt my shoulders because I'm rotating. The shoulder is actually a rotational joint. So like, okay, I want that full range of motion. Well, that's going to be like, all right, I love the kettlebells for this reason for shoulder presses. Like it's my favorite tool for overhead pressing because
Ability.
yeah, I rack it all the way down here. We lock it out at the top. We use the lats to pull it back down. Like it's really shoulder friendly because of the external rotation moment. It's kicking on that subscap, and the subscap's the only muscle that centrates the humerus in the joint. So like you get those people who are like kind of stuck in that forward shoulder. This can help with that a lot. But sorry, I digress.
No, you just brought up something that because you just mentioned lats when we're training shoulder presses, and it's like, what the fuck? This is what we need to understand when it comes to any movement. You need to fight gravity when you're lowering the weights with whatever movement it is. It might not be lowering, it might be pushing, like it might be moving it further away from you, depending if it's a pull or a push exercise, which you only have muscles that pull. Muscles only pull, they don't push. So when you're doing a bicep curl, the muscle is pulling, the bicep is pulling the dumbbell up, but on the way down, you're eccentrically, aka you're releasing the tension from the triceps, because now the triceps, they're not pulling, but they're eccentrically losing, they're eccentrically
They're supporting the elbow from the other side because if you flex your bicep, all right, well your triceps had to kick on for that, your rotator cuff had to kick on for that. Like a lot of things had to turn on for you to flex your biceps and not like have something weird go on in your elbow. So the body doesn't work as like bits and pieces. If you actually get a chance to look at a cadaver, anyone listening, if you can stomach it, I highly recommend it because the reality when you look at muscles, like when you look at the actual muscles, they're not muscles, they're muscle. They're one piece. And what we've done is we've named the various articulations of that one piece, right? But it is all one piece. The nervous system, it works very much as a piece.
Just because you said it's one piece, this is what, coming back to starting off small, the one thing that connects everything is your lats. Your lats aren't just your lats. There's like this huge sheet that is the quote unquote fascia. Well, I don't even know why I quoted that, but it's like the fascia attached to the lats, which attaches to everything. And if you don't learn how to engage your lats, which is why I mentioned this thing as well, it is very difficult for you to be able to functionally move anything without pain. And that's like the same with the shoulder joint, because here you're coming bone against bone, but here you have a lot more articulate. What's an easy word for it? Space. Articulation. I'm trying to think of an easy word for articulation. Like rotational movement. You're able to get a proper rotational movement to move away from the bone from bone in this position. I just wanted to add that into what you were saying.
Oh yeah. There's a whole anatomical thing we could go over that I don't think anybody's going to be interested in hearing. But yes, learning to find your lats is both radically difficult at first and radically important in the long run. And that does take some different drills that we often use for people to help them kind of find them. Sometimes there's some T-spine stuff going on, which is kind of an easy thing to work with. But anyway, I digress. Something I wanted to come back to earlier was you were talking about how your coach had you drop to an empty bar on squats, and I wanted to relay another story very similar of like to get stronger. My squat was always a weak point for me, and the first time I've put a video up on Instagram a couple years back. You know, when I first did this, the first time I squatted 315, ass to grass, no belt, and rested at the bottom and took a couple of breaths down there before standing back up without back pain because I have my own history there. And I did a set of 3 with it. The first time I did that, the way I got there wasn't, all right, I'm going to throw 315 on the bar. I'm coming back to the whole start light thing. What I did was set out with, I think I actually started that program, which was a year long. So bear the timeline in mind. It was a little bit over a year. I started the program around 185, knowing that I could comfortably squat 225 for 10. So I started at 185. And I just did my best to set rep records within reason. Like if I start getting dizzy, I'm gonna rack the weight and step out. And if I start doing what I call a stripper squat, where the hips come up before the chest, I'm gonna rack the weight, right? But I spent that, I think it was about 13, 14 months probably, adding literally about 5 to 10 pounds a month. I used in kind of undulating cycles. So it was a very slow progression. I would have a light week, a moderate week, and a heavy week. No, sorry, moderate, light, heavy. Deload was the way that I like to deload. If I'm under 80% of my 1 rep max in a program, is sometimes I might stay at 80% or go to 75, or still just test the next 5 pounds, especially when I'm moving this slowly. So deload might be like, hey, I'm going to play with the next weight and leave a lot in the tank and just see what it feels like. Or it might be, I'm taking the week off. That's where I'd call an audible. That's one of those more like advanced lifter. And I say advanced not in the sense of like, oh, I'm ridiculously strong, because I'm not. But I'm 40 years old and I've been training for 20 years. So I've got a lot of mileage, and I'm not going to progress in that linear fashion like a beginner or an early intermediate might. So that's where you might call an audible.
That ties back to what we said at the start, where the way that you start anything, it works until it doesn't. And if we keep using, this is what I wanted to mention, like literally at the start of the call, because I feel it is the most fundamental thing. That's what that word meant on here. Because you mentioned that if people are getting bored of the program, that's because they're not progressing. Well, actually, no, because you could be progressing, but your meaning of progress is, oh my goodness, my body's not changing. I'm not seeing physical changes. Well, no freaking shit. You're not going to see it. We mentioned this on our initial podcast that I really hope you guys listen to. You're hardly going to see that muscle changing because it is a slow process. And if you keep using the metrics that you know, like fat loss as an example, I would love your help to get this out, but it's like, no, she's not building muscle and losing fat at the same time, especially on 1,500 calories, because she isn't in a place to actually fuel herself. Why does it look like that? Well, there's this gripe that I have. I would love to just gripe on this. And I know he doesn't listen to my podcasts, because a trainer at my gym, my ex gym, he had clients who competed, and I would see them compete over and over again, because his whole thing that really helped is these lean ladies, and they would do like the season A, season B, always lean, always chasing leaner. I never saw them actually building muscle and growing, because they're living in this like but he had exactly what you mentioned before this call. Not really getting results, but amazing at human connection. His clients love him because he is that person. And he was, well, people thought he was good looking as well. I'm like, I don't see what you see in him, but okay. And it's like, that is what keeps clients, but it wasn't getting them results. And the sad thing is, which I actually pointed out to a couple of the other girls in the gym, because it was really grinding my gears. I'm like, those poor ladies, they were looking worse. Like, I was at that gym for about 2 years. They looked like so much, well, not so much worse, but a couple of them looked so much worse 2 years later, because you're not building muscle in that period of time every single time you diet. Then every time you diet, you're losing muscle mass. And if you don't give enough time to build muscle in between to fuel enough, you're going to look worse and worse over time. Like, yeah, okay, cool. You looked amazing the first time. And this was my thing as well. Like, I looked amazing on stage. I don't know if you ever saw my photos, but I hit my peak probably about halfway through my competing career, but I just kept going and going. And I looked terrible by the end. I was a string bean because I lost muscle in that process because I just kept chasing getting leaner. And yeah, it worked at first, but that's because I gained so much more muscle in that period of time. And then I lost the fat. And that is where you get that like leaner look. But the more that you keep pushing it, the more that you try to stay eating 1,500 calories, not bringing yourself out to fuel yourself, which is what I started the beginning of this conversation with reverse dieting. That isn't going to build muscle. It's what that allows you to then do. You fuel your training. You can then recover, build muscle. Anything works until it doesn't. And I think that's paying off what you just said.
A couple of points there is like the physique shows are not won during the 3 to 4 week diet phase, the prep phase. They're won in the off season, and that off season has to be pretty long. I would say, especially for somebody who's not enhanced, like a minimum of 10 months for that off season. You need to really take a long time to build some muscle. And I want you to think of building muscle the same way you would think of I'm going to show my age a little bit, but back when we had, the 14.4 modem that would dial up to AOL or something, it would take ages to download a picture, and it would come across the screen like almost 1 pixel at a time. And that's kind of how you need to look at building muscle. You've got a 4K screen in front of you. That means 4,000 pixels, and I think that's actually measured, but I don't think that's like literal. It's actually much more than that, but it's 4K across, or it's like 38 something. But count horizontally 4,000, vertically, I don't remember all the specifications. It doesn't matter. There are hundreds of thousands of pixels on your screen. Okay, you are building muscle 1 pixel at a time. This is going to take a while. You can't expect it to be quick, which is why the off season has to be a long time. You have to be in a little bit of a surplus for a long time to effectively build muscle, especially once you're past your newbie gains. Coming back to the everything works for 6 weeks. If you're brand new to the gym, you have a very young training age that doesn't relate to your physical age. I've got people in their 60s and 70s who build muscle in their first year pretty easily. If you have a young training age, it's not hard to build muscle. If you have drugs, it's ridiculously easy. So we just don't really.
Comes back to the comparing as well. No, that
definitely don't compare
as well. But the biggest thing is that social media is not about real life people doing real life things. It is so.
It's not realistic.
Do you see your neighbors next door, the ones who don't give a friggin' shit about fitness, or the ones that are just doing their little cardio aerobics classes, posting that stuff on Instagram? You don't see people in their startups. You don't see people until they've already made it, or if they're getting paid for the job, or you're a 40-year-old comparing yourself to a freaking 23-year-old wanting her results. Like, yeah, she's going to get, I have a client who has dramatically changed her body in the space of a year, and she's 23. Like, in that period of time, and she was new to training stimulus as well. She's someone who did the yo-yo diets, who would do something for a little bit and then come off. She's the one that I spoke about where I mentioned that she, like the one before, where she believed that it needed to be hard for it to be effective. So she would always crash diet. She would do detoxes and cut her carbs. I doubled her carbs when she came to me, quite literally. And she started training consistently for the first time because I made it rewarding for her. And if someone on my training, in my coaching, who's in their 50s, try to compare herself to the results that this 20-year-old got, that's going to be really disheartening. But the point of the fact that I brought this up is because as you age, once you're past the age of 30, you are losing metabolism and muscle by the decade, by the year. So you need to be doing everything you can to stimulate that muscle to grow, which requires you lifting heavy for where you are right now. Even if that's the 5 kilo dumbbells, that is heavy for what you are doing, and then progressively overloading. But the point of the fact is, it is harder to build muscle than it is to lose fat the older you go. And the more that you keep trying to do what worked at first, the worse you're going to look. And then as soon as perimenopause hits, that's when you start blaming cortisol and hormones and age, where it's realizing that your old approaches aren't working now moving forward. And back to the comparison, because this is what I wanted to tie it to so that you can then go back to that part. I always used to get asked what I'm doing for my legs. Why are my legs so lean? And this was when I started doing my running for the triathlon as well. I'm like, well, if you did my leg program, you would never see results. I'm sorry, because I was hardly training legs. Because for my triathlon, I had to reduce all of my volume. And I was just doing, for example, a deadlift and one other exercise on one day. And then I did 2 other leg exercises on Wednesday, and then 2 other leg exercises on Friday. But it wasn't enough to build muscle. It was just enough to maintain it there. And it was to support my running. What someone is doing now isn't what got them there. You need to look at the history before. I did powerlifting. I did hypertrophy training. It's not what I was doing in that moment that got me those legs. And the same with running. This part was what I wanted to go off, because hybrid training. I'm a runner. I do this. Let's glorify cardio. I love cardio. I don't love cardio, but I don't love cardio, but I'm a fan of aerobic health. But if you're someone who wants to radically change your body, you need to focus on muscle first. Support it with cardio if your recovery requires it. But once you build sufficient muscle and mobility and all that kind of stuff, then you can actually take the cardio somewhere without banging up your knees, your hips. I bet you anything that you've seen so many people come into you with bung up knees and hips because of poor running mechanics, or there's weaknesses somewhere. But at the same time, if you don't have the recovery capacity, and if you're not actually putting in the work to do the training side of things, you're not going to have the muscle or the endurance or the strength to actually make that running something that you can do long term without your body breaking down. So that running,
something to bear in mind with running too. I'll say this later, but
yeah,
something to bear in mind with running.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's not running and weights that got them looking jacked and lean and amazing. If that's what you think you're missing in the piece of the puzzle, I need to do running, I need to be a hybrid because these people look fucking amazing. No, it's only because they did all of the work to build the muscle first, and now they just added in running. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, generally the best CrossFit competitors are not people who did CrossFit. They are people who used to do Olympic weightlifting, who got very, very strong and then jumped into CrossFit. And when you look at their programs that they actually do, CrossFit is in there usually once or twice a week as their cardio. It's not their main lift. It's not how they get strong. It's not how they go win those competitions. And then, we won't talk about, whether or not they're, enhanced. It's kind of irrelevant to the conversation. The point is that their training that they do isn't what you think it is. It is more structured. It is more planned, periodized, progressed, purposeful, and that's a lot of alliteration, which I'm very happy about. I love alliteration. Coming back to comparisons, I had a client I was talking to yesterday who had some concerns. She's like, I'm not making progress as fast as these other people, and we had a conversation, and it's like, okay, there's a lot of alcohol that might hold you back. There are genetic predispositions. There are different injury histories. You have this history, which does play into that a bit in terms of we have to be very careful with some movements. And this other person you're comparing yourself to doesn't have any of those things in there. This person over here is putting all these little pixels together on their diet to make this very pretty picture, and you're not tracking anything, and you aren't doing any of these other, what I asked what you're doing, and what you told me, what I'm hearing is I have no structure. I eat what I want when I want. Every time I walk by the butter, I eat it, and I drink alcohol every day. Okay, well, I won't judge you for that. If you know the cost of doing business and you're cool with it, that's fine. You do you, man. I'm gonna tell you, here's the cost. Here's why you don't see that change. If that's okay with you, continue. But pick your priorities and make sure you're eating and recovering according to your values, living according to your values. If your values say the daily alcohol and the butter is more important than the fitness, who am I to judge? I don't have a right to judge there. Cool, you do you. We'll keep training. Just don't expect to match their results. That's okay. If your values say I'd rather have the results, then we're going to have a different conversation. Never a judgmental one, but I might make some suggestions, and you can take what you're ready for, and we'll leave the rest for later. I wrote a bunch of things down I wanted to hit on here. Something I was saying earlier is like people who want that change every 4 weeks. It might be worth bearing in mind, especially once you're out of your newbie gains, that it might take you a good 6 weeks to be proficient enough neurologically at a lift to actually see a hypertrophic effect. In other words, even for an advanced lifter or an intermediate lifter who's already good, let's take someone who's got a 200-pound body weight, they bench 300 pounds. Okay, it might still take them 6 weeks into their program before that bench press is going to be effective for hypertrophy because they haven't done it in a while. If you took a week off, it's going to change a few things neurologically. So your first 6 weeks of a program are not about hypertrophy. It's why we start soft. Why does it look like I'm making gains in some people? Well, their muscles are starting to store more glycogen because they're recognizing there's a need. So they're going to hold more water, store more glycogen. You'll see more storage in the muscle. The muscle belly itself, the actual like myofibrils and everything, like they didn't grow yet, right?
Did you see my reel on that?
I'm not sure if I did.
I had lean mints, and I'm like, yes, muscle weighs more than fat because muscle isn't just this. Like, it's not. I had lean mints, then I had bread, then I had a bottle of water. That is what muscle is. Muscle is only heavier because if you're talking about this actual muscle tissue, this is a kilo of muscle. The muscle is here. I mean, this is a kilo of muscle. This is a kilo plus the water plus the glycogen, and then this is a kilo of fat. But this is the muscle. This whole muscle is 1 kilo plus all of this. And that's why people never build the body they want, because this freaks them out because it's this big and they think they've built enough muscle. No, you just have this combobulation of what makes up a muscle cell. Continue.
Yeah. So I want to throw that out there for people who want the entertainment and get bored with exercises. If you're getting bored, it means you're not focusing hard enough. Or it means you've kept that exercise in for like 2 years and never varied it one bit. Like you've kept your bench press in for 2 years and never changed your grip, your tempo, or you've been using the same weight every week and the same number of reps every week. Oh, I'd get bored too, and your body's going to get bored, and that's eventually where something's going to go very, very, very wrong for you. So variation without change. But yes, that first 6 weeks is not about building muscle. It is about preparing to build muscle. So bear that in mind as you start a new program. I also want to say, I think we should I almost feel like we should reclassify heavy as progressive. I'm not lifting, like, yes, I want you to lift heavy. I want you to lift progressively. And that will eventually be heavy. Again, a workout isn't there to make you tired. You will eventually get to the point in a workout where it does make you very, very tired. But that's not the point. It's a side effect and the culmination of a lot of good training. And you already kind of nailed this one of like, do what people, if you look at a body on Instagram or whatever, and you try to do what they're currently doing, it's probably not going to work because what they did to get where they are, I can think of a lot of bodybuilders. I can think of a few coaches, actually. There's one in particular that comes to mind who will purport what he's currently doing as the way. But what he's currently doing didn't work until he got on testosterone. What he did before worked phenomenally well for him and for the people that did it with him. But we're no longer purporting that method. It's worth bearing in mind the history. It is worth bearing in mind genetics. But I would say it's irresponsible to look at somebody and copy what they're currently doing without first learning what they used to do, where they started, how they got there, and maybe looking at their track record with clients. I like to see a good 1,000 client load under someone's belt personally before I decide I'm going to learn from that person. So and I want to see a lot of consistency there. So, granted, my bar is pretty high, and I know that will exclude some good information, but it also guarantees that I'm going to only get really good information. Anyway, those are my rants.
But wait,
Uh,
don't end that part yet. That part was important because it can be really easy to look at how quickly I progressed my deadlift because I didn't deadlift until this year because I was doing just Romanian deadlifts and shit last year and straight leg stiff leg deadlifts, which do you prefer stiff leg or Romanian deadlifts yourself?
I don't personally, and I
No,
probably should.
but like
Yeah,
if
me personally, yeah. I've been thinking I want to start including some stiff leg because there's a muscle in there, and I'm not sure if I say it correctly, plantaris or plantaris, but it attaches down at the bottom of the foot. And I've had a few clients come in where when we've looked at their plantar fasciitis or their heel pain, I found the root of it to be up there, and it's kind of the back of the knee slash under the calf. It's a little bit on the deep side, like it's deep to the gastroc, and it's very much north of the foot. But what I found is when we work on it effectively, the plantar fasciitis gets a lot better. And so,
such a
if
good
not
point.
entirely goes away, which is, yeah, it's a totally different topic. But it had me thinking because I've never personally used, I've done them and hated them because of how awful they felt, which tells me it's
Fucking
exactly
love
what I need.
I
Yeah.
love them. Stiff leg deadlifts.
Well,
That was my point. It's like I used to want to get better at my RDLs, and I know that I need to because RDLs are better for your glutes than stiff leg deadlifts. But
yeah.
I just love stiff leg deadlifts. But
Yeah.
yeah, go
I
finish.
think I probably should is where I was going with that is like, yeah, I probably ought to start including these pretty soon. So
Yeah, that what I want. I reckon next week when we talk about this as well, we'll talk about like quote unquote warm ups and mobility and stretching and training
I'm
as
into it.
rehab. Yeah, because I feel like
I have thoughts.
a lot of people don't understand that training done well covers like literally everything. It is rehab. It is your mobility. It is your stability. It is preventing many things. It's so many things for you. But if we only view it in terms of, I want to burn as many calories as possible, I want to do as much as possible, I want to this, that, and the other, that's when we start to roll down something. But what I was trying to get to with that point is you can easily, because I was doing Romanian deadlifts and stiff leg deadlifts, and now I just started deadlifts this year. And I was starting out at, actually, this was more of an issue when I didn't do deadlifts at all, not even stiff leg deadlifts, and I was just doing Romanian deadlifts for like 2 years because I was trying to not have systemic fatigue so I can just go all out on hypertrophy. And I started out struggling with 90 kilos. And this was because I tore my hamstring. I told you that story already.
Mhm.
I tore my hamstring. So deadlifts completely off the bat. And then I just went to Romanians and I just kept it there. When I brought deadlifts back in, it was 80 kilos. And then within a month, I was at 100. And then within a couple months, I was back at 120, 130, 140, progressive. And for a normal person, quote unquote normal, but what I meant by normal is for any typical person seeing that progress, you might be, how is she progressing so fast? How did she get over there? Why is she able to get that strong? And I'm stuck, not even hitting triple digits. What you guys did not see is I lifted almost 190 kilos in 2018, and I was a power lifter. And if you
And spent years getting there.
yeah, years, and consistently and fueling for it. And it was my sole focus. And I showed up for it. I wasn't dieting. If you then look at me now and you entered my journey back, like at that period of time, you would have missed out on all the context that made the pixels the picture, as you would say. And that, like, these are all really important things to take in mind when we are looking at, to bring it full circle, the cardio, because you wanted to bring up cardio. So I'm going to let you touch on the cardio before, like, to tie it all off. But
Well, yeah, I've got a hard out here in like 2 minutes, but
yeah, I wanted you to tie
maybe
that
say
off.
the cardio.
Yeah, you need to keep that in mind when you're looking at all of these different things that people do. So I'm going to let you tie it off with the cardio, and then that's what we're going to pick up on our next chat.
Yeah. So allostatic load adds up. And that just means like total stress load. And cardio it can add to, it can remove from. It really depends on how you're using it, what tools you're using, how you're using them. Something I always say is how you do something is more important than what you're doing. And I'll give an example. You can do a very bad program with very good intention and very good mindset, and you'll get great results. You can do a very good program with poor intention and poor execution and get no results. So how you do something, especially your cardio, is more important than what you're choosing to do for your cardio. It can help you or it can hurt you. Again, that comes back to how. And I'm going to leave the rest for the next one.
Mm,
Yeah.
I think that would be perfect. So how you do things, that comes into the mobility, the stability. This comes into how everything pieces together to get you more functional. Because if you think of physios, if you think of all that stuff, they're there to help you get back into play, to be able to function and walk around again. But then we want to take that and bring you back to where you were functioning before at that higher level, so that we can then build back stronger. Like all these different elements come together. And this is, like you mentioned with the cadaver, everything is connected. Everything is connected. It's not just about you need to eat more protein, you need to eat more carbs, you need to eat more, because all these things in isolation are taking away from the actual pictures on the roadmap that get you to where you want to be. And you're going to end up in the wrong direction if you only focus on one set of directions without taking into consideration all the other parts that come together to get you moving in the right direction, and with context, with understanding, and permanently, not as a vacation. And then you have to bring your way all the way back, because you didn't just waste time, you also wasted money with all the traveling there, the stopping, the refueling. Anything that got you to that wrong destination was wasted. Energy, stress, time. We want to get you to the right destination with the detours that are inevitable on the way there. But at least the direction is north, not west, northeast, anywhere else. It's north. So with that, any parting words?
The pixels make the picture. Context always matters. Hard and fast rules are rarely the right answer. It's usually something with nuance. That's why most questions people ask me, especially if they're asking a very generalized question, my answer is almost always going to be it depends. But I would say to listen to people with nuance in their speaking and to bear in mind the context that they're using it in.
I love that. Okay, you guys will hear us next week. Any questions, message either of us. Everything's down below. And sign your reader. I'll cut the ending off.